I now just also please ask your question, but I want to say I will have to answer the main question you asked last, which was really the cosmic and the metaphysical aspect. So, but
Yeah,
please.
yeah, because I have this idea of mandalas, that you can divide the mandalas in many different kind of mandalas. Yes, the ones that maybe are Tibetans and are created for sacred things and ritualistic things. The others that are created for concentration and are more for psychology work. Yes. The ones that are created more like just in the moment, yes, is psyche, I don't know, psyche mandalas. And I mean, I have like more than 20 classifications about it, just the religious, coming from Christianity, others from Celtic and Native Americans, and you can see this archetype many places. So Raga, in the same way, so if we say that Raga can be placed in an structure of mandala, then we'll have these many levels of classifications, yes, that can be religious and can be also ritualistic and can be also blah 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 mathematics, yes, and other kind of things, healing, like you say. And also this Raga can go to the cosmos, yes, can resonate with the higher resonance and then come down to us. So there is like huge levels of ragas. It's big, no topic. So well, just was like this, and yes, you can. I think it's big question, but it's related with the last one. Yes,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, and so where to start? I guess this would be picking up on that. I mean, those experiences, and there's a mythos and a mythology to raga musicians, and that's part of the tradition as well, that you grow up learning about how ragas can invoke supranormal or superpowers in a way, siddhis, like Tansen in Akbar's court had the power of the raga and was able to. He would sing a Deepak, which was the raga to invoke fire, for instance. So the raga is being connected and directly related to the power, like to the natural powers, the elements, if you will. Wow, and so part of the stories or the mythology is that Tansen did that, and he sang the raga, and it lit the lanterns in the court. And he also had a singer ready to sing Rag Meg, which is a monsoon raga, because he said this raga, singing this raga, the fire raga, it heats me up too much and I may die. I could die. So after I light the lanterns, then you sing the monsoon raga, and then you'll bring the rains and cool me down. And so that this is like part of the mythology of how people can kind of, through the tapasya or the inner concentration that connects to the cosmic will, if you can evoke these natural powers and control these natural powers through music. And this goes right into, well, how is that possible, right? And the questions are going to be, how do we understand that as being a possibility? Because in let's say a Western worldview, a more scientific modern worldview, exactly, there would be no way to understand how this is possible, because a human is limited in what it's connected to, or it's a finite. We are finite in a certain sense, and in the Western canon, it's more like we will worship God through certain rituals, but we cannot become God in a way. Whereas in Eastern traditions, it's like the aspiration of some of these followings is to become a god itself, to become the god. It really depends on what tradition you're following, right? And so that would be based on a metaphysics that that doesn't separate the divine or God or the a higher sense of reality, you know, from the human or the life world, the vital world, for instance. And so that's one of the big questions in all over the world in terms of the wisdom traditions from all over the world. And every tradition, every part of the world and every tradition within those parts has different ways of approaching this question, the finiteness of the human versus the infiniteness of the cosmos or God, for instance. And so this is where, in my methodology, for instance, you have the Indian tradition, and specifically through Sri Aurobindo's interpretations of the Vedic, Upanishadic, and Bhagavad Gita, those traditions. And in the West, this like Gilles Deleuze, for instance, from the continental side, specifically actually Gilles Deleuze, there is an opening. Now, he's not going to be speaking of God so much or of some kind of a transcendent superpower, but his philosophy does open, and we are connected to some radically infinite outside. That would be one way to articulate it. And in the East, it's the same thing. We can create an interface with what is outside of us, what is outside of our own finiteness. We can create experiences, and through the mystical traditions all over the world, you could say, are the archives of history that show us those possibilities. Is that mystics, for instance, and artists, for instance, as well, express experiences that go beyond the normal habitual mode of being in the world, that seemingly are opening to some kind of an infinite potential, some kind of an experience that cannot be contained within the finite interpretation of reality that we normally have. And so with that metaphysical basis, then we can become a god in a way. We can become in touch with cosmic powers, or we can at least allow those powers to kind of flow through us and create through us. And this is, in a way, both of these traditions I'm speaking about, Deleuze, for instance, and also Tagore Yoga, it's really decentering the human in a way, like the autonomous, individualized human that has a rational function that can order the cosmos at our will, because we have the rational function, which is the logos, for instance. And we've inherited this view from European Enlightenment, and it's kind of developed itself. It's gone from theology, and it's transposed into the contemporary, in a way, in a different way, that neoliberal idea of subjectivity. But in a sense, these traditions are really trying to kind of fracture or decenter or shatter this kind of the ego or the I maker in that is saying, I am the center of the cosmos, or I am the center of my own reality, and I will create the reality according to my own ideas of it, meaning the mind's ideas of it, right? And so that's where this idea of a ritual or a psychocosmological ritual, that's a word, another way of saying a spiritual ritual, can actually open us to cosmic forces and make us realize that there are forces and there are organized forces. And this is where your idea of the mandala is coming in. These are organized forces. It's not just a chaotic force outside of us. Nature has its own organization, its own plan, if you will, its own proportionality. You can see sacred geometry, you can see proportions everywhere, whether that's in organic life, whether that's in inorganic life, whether that's in cosmic celestial bodies. There's a proportionality that's at play. And I think that the idea in yoga, for instance, would be to go, and also in this continental tradition, starting with Henri Bergson, who's a famous French philosopher, who's before the postmodern turn. He's a contemporary of Sri Aurobindo, actually. And they're looking, like Bergson is talking about, an intuitive method. So rather than trusting the mind to deduce what reality is and can be, and kind of harness potentials accordingly, there's an intuitive sense to beyond the mind, and intuition can help us perceive and be a part of these larger forces and their organization. And in integral yoga, that's where Sri Aurobindo, through the planes and the parts of the being that he has come up with, or he has experienced, for instance, he would say that the mind, and then there's an intuitive mind, there's an illumined mind, there's an overmind, there's a supramind. And so these are all experiences that he had, that he kind of codified, I guess, in his own sense, but are actually based on somebody's not accepting them and just saying, well, that's what reality is, but trying to experience them. And so in my experience, raga music practice has been that exact thing. It's been a ritual, in a sense, not a religious ritual, but a psychocosmological one that has allowed me to engage in a tradition and order elements, musical elements and cultural elements, for instance, but like, let's say, musical elements like instruments and the drone, and also engage with history in a way, like the voice of my guru, who I learned from, is carrying history in the tradition in his voice. We have recordings that I was able to listen to and have them kind of evoke potentials within me. And so I see this as a space that's more than musical. It's not just musical, but it's very much driven by musicality. And it's really a ritual. It's like, you could say, going back to the Vedic times when they were doing fire rituals. Fire was the central point. Well, in Nad yoga, Nad meaning the cosmic sound, the yoga of cosmic sound in a way, it's really a ritual in that where music is centralized. And that's how I've experienced this. And it's meant, like I said, ordering musical elements is ordering. It means learning the proportion and the order of other types of ways in which the environment, like, let's say, the seasons. How do the seasons impact this practice? In North Indian music, you have many, like in earlier days, they had poetry that described 12 seasons for every month, and there would be different ragas that would kind of describe the natural environment at that time. So there's like a natural level, like an ecological level to raga music. Like, some of my favorite ragas are monsoon ragas. There's many beautiful monsoon ragas. There's spring ragas. There's not as many, but some winter ragas. And so there's like an ecological or natural level. Sometimes the ragas describe kind of psychological states, emotional states, describing the loss of a lover, or the reuniting with a loved one after a treacherous journey or something, right? So there's kind of like the mythology that's built into interhuman relationships and the emotional content. So that's another level that raga music engages with. There's a spiritual as well, where it's dealing with Sanskrit spiritual concepts that are sung and evoked in the raga music. So that would be also part of this, a different level, a different plane, if you will, that you learn how to engage with, and you learn the ordering, you learn the proportionality within a certain raga, a certain musical context. And so all of this is just as me describing how the musicological perspective is one of so many different perspectives that are engaged with in the raga music ritual as I've experienced it. And in terms of, the cosmic level, I mean, the ragas are described as being the devas, like of the gods themselves. They're the archetypal. They were seen by the rishis, for instance, as being some kind of archetypal sound bodies, sound devas or devis. And that would be another level where a raga is something that is being, it sort of descends. If you organize the ritual and you tune yourself as well, like your all the different parts of the being as well. Like for instance, your chakras, there's different ways that you can engage in Rag sadhana. But you tune yourself. There's aspect of surrender in my practice, and aspiration and opening to a descent of something that is outside of me. And that was how I learned to open to the descent of these forces. And they organize themselves in me according to a proportionality and an architectonic that exists at a cosmic level. And that would be a cosmic level. And then the last level that I will mention is when and this, I would say, this is something that I think that I feel the possibilities are there. And again, it's built into the idea of yoga, is to become to become intoxicated, or to become completely become the divine itself, and that's where, if even at a certain point of playing a raga, maybe there's another rupture that happens where even that archetypal deity merges in with the one being there is, the one radically infinite reality in itself. So that's a possibility that yoga, for instance, is going to say that through raga sadhana is possible. Something that is I would say is a possibility. I've not experienced that myself, but but I definitely the more time that I spent in India, like years and years would go by, but I felt all of these realities all of these experiences became more and more common, more normal for me, and I was able to discern these different levels much more accurately, because I was going through the subjective science of yoga, the self-practice, the self-experimentation of what happens if you practice ragas every day for 10 hours a day. Well, you can only do it, and the possibilities are different for everybody. But that was one experiment that I did, and I really loved doing that. And I still continue my raga practice. I don't have 10 hours a day to devote to raga music because I'm doing a PhD, but that decade in India has really become a big part of who I am. And I think has also, as much as I've let's say I've opened myself to this culture, this practice, and tried to allow these ragas to kind of descend in a way, or to play through me. I feel that they've also shaped my subtle body, the ways in which the ragas live in me. And that goes right back to one of your questions, is like, how can our bodies ragas? How can we converse with these ragas, and how can we become a raga ourselves? And it's a beautiful question. And in a way, it's more like a family of ragas too, because there's like people would say there's thousands or tens of thousands or unlimited amounts of possibilities of ragas. But there's a handful of, maybe my guru would probably know 200 or 150 ragas really well. I know a fraction of that, but but it's really a family of ragas. It's not just one raga. It's like in the scale that I sang earlier, which is in the Tat of Kalyan, I sang a couple of the phrases of Yaman, for instance. But there's many ragas that share those notes that are different because they have different kind of governing architectonics. But they're all related. They're very similar. And so to know one raga, you need to know all of the surrounding ragas that it is not. And so that's another way to think about it. But anyway, this has been a very long answer, but it's a very big question.
Yes. Thank you. No, I love it. But mostly, I understand that you just can open yourself to the cosmic raga, or the one that are descending, when you are really devoted to that. Yes, it's not accidental. They are not going to come to you in an accidental way. It's like
right.
No way that they are going to descend to you just because you are there sitting watching soccer or football, or how Brazil wins. Yes, the raga is not going to come to you. Yes, you need practice. Yes.
Right. Yeah, and I yes, exactly. I think that, well, again, like the ragas being a very specific cultural practice. I mean, North Indian raga music specifically, I've experience with. There's another tradition in the South. Carnatic music has a different type of ritual, a different emphasis, a different architectonic, and it's still I think what you'd say it can function in a similar way, but yeah, I think that it goes for any sadhana, like the goal. What's your goal, and what is it that you're working towards? What kind of subtle aspects or subtle energies or powers are you really trying to engage with and to kind of normalize in your body and in your mind, in your being? How are working on self-exceeding, and one of the goals of yoga, for instance, is for the individual to become cosmic, and so that's really, every sadhana is going to have a different practice, a different set of practices, a different and a different flow as well. But raga music is based on that logic. And yeah, I mean, the ragas are very set in the traditional understanding, the kind of like the language or the codes that have been cultivated for. I mean, North Indian music goes back to the Mughal era, really, when it was Drupad was the form of music sung, and that's sort of the root of the music that I'm learning. And so it's rooted to that culture for sure. But I find that, my being a cross-cultural being is that my goals are related to, what I've been speaking about. But as an improvising Western jazz musician, I also have that part in my, you could say, my mandala of becoming. That would be something Debashish would say. I have many nodes. We all do. We all can think of ourselves as a collection of interests and things, passions, whether it's authors we love to read or things we like to do with our loved ones or communities, friends, spiritual texts, like the list goes on. For me, cooking is one very important aspect of myself that that really energizes me, that is important to me. Raga music is another, and improvised jazz music is another. And so I find that these two worlds, when I'm able to step outside of being completely immersed in one, then you have experiences that are not really necessarily defined by or are common in either. And so I think that it's interesting because now I look at improvised music, for instance, or jazz improvised music, and sometimes I'm trying to find a place in where these types of experiences with ragas are possible, but without the raga framework, without the raga, or without the specifics of the raga as it is traditionally rendered. And that's it's an abstract question maybe, but it's part of me. It's part of how these things are kind of flowing together and colliding at times, but also like producing something that I could never expect, something I could never design with the mind. That's for sure. That's sort of where I'm at now. And so in terms of musical experience in general, sometimes I find myself improvising with friends and being taken into a transpersonal or a mystical place where I don't necessarily know what structures are creating what, or what what is exactly how I've gotten to where I am. It could be that some of the maybe certain aspects of raga music are mixing in with certain aspects of Western music, and it's a different type of, it's a hybrid experience, different structures of consciousness, different structures of organization, and different structures of transcendence as well, beyond the limitations of the self.
Okay.